Morning, everybody. I have some good news for you before we continue on, and it'll be the first of a few Sundays where I get to announce some neat additions to the team and the staff here at Prairie Alliance Church. But this one is probably the most exciting for many of you because you already know this person, and as I announce what they're going to be doing, you're going to go, oh, and then you'll go, yay, and then you want to go find her in kids' church and tell her how excited you are. We have hired Teresa Stanley as our youth pastor. Now, the reason you're hearing the cheering is because most people, especially of a certain age here, know what it is to have been encouraged by Teresa in their teenage years, know what it is to have made a better choice because of Teresa in your teenage years, know how it has been to be encouraged to make it through one more day with her encouragement and companionship. So we're super excited about her getting to do full-time what she's done for a decade or so, part-time and informally, just as a volunteer. So we're excited about that. That starts pretty soon, and there's other pieces of that puzzle that we're going to talk about as we move along this month. Now, let's talk about this Four Loves series. The gist is that a few years ago, the board was praying about things that we as a church could hang on to forever, we could pray about forever. We wouldn't have to change them every 4 or 5 years as if, okay, we're going to go this way. No, that doesn't seem like it's the season anymore. We're going to go this way. Things we wouldn't have to change, that we could just stick with forever. Pray for until they come true. Work for until we see them in front of our eyes. Fall in love with them until they're front and center. And those things were, it's always this moment after I sell them like that with lots of excitement that I'm like, oh crap, I'm going to forget them. No. One-touch healing, multi-site churches across rural Manitoba, 1/3 First Nations, and an award-winning town. Now, what's happened already in this series for me is I've regressed into a certain way of thinking about them. And last week I caught myself just in time. This week, I don't know if I've caught myself in time, so it could get interesting. What I caught myself doing was saying, I have to somehow justify these. I have to show to people that these are actually in the Bible. See? So like last week, let's take healing. See, Jesus heals everywhere he goes. It's a sign of the kingdom. People come to him in faith. He responds. They're healed. Then Jesus says, now you guys go do it. And they go do it. So therefore, we should anticipate it and we should lean into it. Right, everybody? Right? No? Yeah? Huh? So last week we went in a very different direction, and I thought, well, that was good. It was good that I caught myself. This time I caught myself at like 10:30 this morning, where I had a nice little sermon going, okay, let's do 1/3 First Nations people. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start about this vision of the kingdom that involves everybody in it. See, everyone, see. And then this idea that the church is supposed to be the sign of a kingdom. And so when people come in here, they need to see right now that that kind of thing is actually possible, that there can be that kind of unity in diversity, and the church is supposed to look at what's coming and say, okay, if that's what's coming, then that's what we need to work for now, and as unbelievable as it might seem, God doesn't usually ask us to do what's possible. He asks us to do the impossible. Let's just work for that. So it was going to kind of be, let's work towards this, and everybody goes, oh yeah, that makes sense biblically. But I think here's what we need to do instead. We need to be a little more raw, and we need to be a little more honest. We need to not send this one to Nipuan. We need to not probably put it on the internet, because it's going to be a white religious guy talking about racism and religion. So what could possibly go wrong? And it's a cultural climate where even if you say something like, I really love those people, somebody can put a noose around your neck and give it a yank because you said those people. What's so different about those people? What are you saying about those, right? So they miss that you said, but I really love them. So we get into this, the other person and me and superiority and inferiority, and everything just has to be so incredibly delicate, but it can't really be delicate when you're addressing a gaping wound in Canadian society and a wound that is actually mirrored in the heart of God, and those need to be healed. They need to be healed here. So we're not going to say, you know what, it started out 1/3 First Nations people here because that's the demographic in our community, and then a bunch of folks went, what are people projects? 1/3, where'd you get that fraction? And so we kind of regress and go, it's just a social demographic, and we want rich and we want poor, and we soft and soft. And no, no, no. Our specific call in Portage la Prairie is that we would be a church whose congregation is made up of 1/3 First Nations people, and so it would be a sign of the kingdom to come, the beauty and the diversity. That's our call. To get there, I think it's probably helpful for you to know how this racist white kid who grew up in Portage la Prairie became somebody who almost every day spends time in tears praying for this dream to happen. So let's just talk a little bit about how Nathan grew up and where Nathan is now and what God did in there, as much as I understand it, because much of it I don't understand. One of my earliest memories is when my dad was at Bible school, Prairie Bible Institute in Alberta, and for some sort of training thing, I think it was, he got to go with this group, Northern Canadian Evangelical Missions, NCEM. And so we go off as a family to this reserve called Tall Cree, Northern Alberta. And I remember Dad in the might have been a band office or town hall or something like that, setting up chairs for this service, and the family's there, and I'm like probably 5 or 6, and my sister Erin's 3, and Sally is like 2 months maybe, or 3 months. She was just born that spring, I think. She spent the whole summer under mosquito net. I remember that. And no one came. Dad preached a faithful sermon to the 4 of us. Mom gave him some amens just on cue, and kids, we were like twiddling our thumbs, and Sally was just under the mosquito net. So there was this heart, I think, early on in my parents for crossing cultural borders with the message of Jesus. I remember that summer mainly from swimming in the river up north, chasing my little buddies around with Lego guns, flicking elastic bands at each other, that kind of thing. The only white kid I saw all summer, basically, was in the mirror. And I remember pulling away in our little green Chevy, I think it was Chevy Malibu station wagon, and about 6 of my little buddies, and their dusty faces just waving as we pulled away. It was sad, because I wasn't sure what was going to happen to them. I'd been in some of their homes. It was different than my home. It wasn't as safe, different environment, different bottles on the counter, that kind of thing. We moved to Portage. My mom and dad continued to do that kind of stuff. They partner with the Portage Friendship Center, and every Thursday night, some years, and others it was Sunday afternoon, did a program they called Super S, and the S stand for 3 things. I don't remember what those 3 things were. Snacks was probably one of them. The other 2, I won't bother trying to remember. And that's when I first realized my heart's pretty messed up this way, because I'm about 11 and 12. And I've done enough babysitting, and I've done enough, I don't know if I was teaching swimming lessons at that point. Anyway, I guess there was, what I'm saying is I knew there was some kids you could get away with treating a certain way, and you could get away with that, and others that mom and dad would intervene. And I don't know where I picked that up. But I had this really bad memory of this kid acting up. He'd be about 8 years old, and I was 12, and coming up behind and just grabbing like this muscle here that really hurts, and just cranking on this kid and having him squirm underneath. And the impunity with I could do that to a kid on a Sunday afternoon that I would never dream of doing it on a Sunday morning, simply based on color of skin and the evil that had grown in my heart. It's appalling as I think about it. Through my teenage years, my friends and I, no one would have called us racist. We were just Portage kids. So we probably had 5 or 6 different names, none of which I'll repeat for you, that are derogatory for First Nations people. Go away for a few years. Almost like a out of Portage detox in a way, because there is a unique climate here. When I play hockey in Vancouver and people start to talk snarky about other people, it doesn't have the racial tinge that it does in Portage. And so when I came back to Portage, I maybe a little bit enlightened now in Vancouver, a master's degree, you understand how to talk better so you don't sound a certain way, but it can still be in your heart for sure. I was appalled at some of the things that were being said in the dressing room that would stop being said when an Aboriginal person would come in. Still not appalled enough to do much of it, but just, superiorly appalled at such things going on in front of my nose as if I could ever do anything. It's just right there in front of me. I just powerless. Except you can say, shut up. Don't say that. Didn't say that. So the years continue on here, probably 5 or 6, and God, maybe 7 or 8, and God gives us this prayer. And it's a nice prayer. All our prayers are pretty nice in a way. Wouldn't that be nice if that happened? Not gonna happen, but it would be nice. And so we're living in this a little bit, and as you live in something and it's actually a prayer and you pray for it, things start to happen in your heart. And here's a couple cracking moments for my racist heart. It's about 4 years ago, first day at West Park. And there's these kids from Long Plain that have come to high school here. You remember high school? Yeah? A little bit insecure high school. Imagine their situation. You come on the bus, you're into this church school. And high school's high school, or West Park kids, I've seen them try and connect, try and reach out, but high school's high school. It's just, it can be tough sometimes. And I walked over to those doors at lunch. We had a 1 o'clock meeting. And there's 4 of these kids from Long Plain, and they're standing around looking at the parking lot as if they got somebody coming to pick them up. Right? There's something on the go here. We're people who have friends, and we're connected, and just because we're not connecting here, we got so many friends coming to pick us up in vehicles soon, and we're going to go be friends with them. And I realize they're all bluffing. Nobody's coming to pick them up. It reminded me of when I was in high school, when I was nervous and felt like I didn't fit. I did this yawn, because nothing says I'm cool and relaxed like yawning. I'd be like, that was the sign that said I'm dying inside. It got to me, and I sat there babbling like a fool, trying to connect with these 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old kids who are wondering, why is this guy here? Asking me about movies, asking me about music, asking me about my shoes, my hair. Is that tattoo real? Like, just getting increasingly invasive, and I was like, I better just stop. I was 15 minutes late for a meeting. Mike, you would have been there, Chris, a few others, Lydia perhaps. And so people were waiting for me. I walked in and I just came undone. I couldn't stop crying. And it just kept coming back over and over and over. We went on sabbatical. One of the places we were was Vernon, BC. This is last year. I had so many of you say things about sabbatical like, we're scared you weren't coming back. And rightly so. You go on sabbatical, you meet some people, you see some other churches. You're kind of in that demographic that everybody wants in their church. You're a 40-year-old guy who's got 20 years of experience, so you're still young enough to kind of draw in the young folks, but you're getting old enough that the old people tolerate you, and so everyone wants to hire you. So there's no shortage of opportunity to go places. And one of the most appealing ones was the city of Vernon. Church there, about 1,600 people, and some hints. And Vernon is nice. Silver Star's right there. My buddy's got a house. There's ski trails. There's mountain biking. So I'm thinking about it. I'm praying about it. Town's name is Vernon. Spirit of God says to me, that's the wrong Vernon. The Vernon your life is about is Vernon Roulette, who lives at Dakota Plains. That's the Vernon your life is about. So forget the bigger church, forget the mountain village, forget whatever you think is coming with that. Your life is about trying to heal this massive wound and bringing God glory through it. Pretty clear. Written in the journal. Talked to the board about it, sent them an email. I was like, if you guys are worried about me going somewhere else, don't worry anymore. Pretty darn clear. You guys know we've been moving into something new for many of us, something still kind of freaky. It's like one of these weird things where people are terrified of it or else they've been freed by it. Talking about deliverance from spiritual oppression. So on this side of it, you're like, oh, what a weird, crazy, nut bar thing. I'll give it a go. And then on this side, you're like, wow, I've been freed because I've actually had spiritual enemies trying to hurt me, trying to mess me up, trying to screw me up, and now they've been given the boot, and I'm over here and I'm actually feeling like my life lines up with Scripture in the sense that I have power and freedom. Things have been broken that used to hang on to me. So about 2 months ago, I talked to you a little bit on Sunday morning and then in more detail on Sunday night about my experience from like, wow, that's freaky, to freedom. And I talked about some of the spiritual oppression that was in my life, but I didn't tell you about one very specific spiritual presence. It relates this morning. It's part of my journey, and it's part of this for us here. So how this works is you've got people praying for you. And as they're praying for you, they're not talking to you. They're using Jesus' authority. They're talking to the spiritual powers that are oppressing you. Okay? And it's something. So you're sitting there, and part of your brain's going, okay, wow, this is actually happening, and the other half is saying stuff. So there's anger, there's hopelessness, there's different things that are being sent where Jesus would send them, taken from me, not to return. Then the next prayer is, Spirit that Jesus wants to deal with, come to attention in Nathan. What is your name? Up to this point, it's been things like anger, jealousy. And I'm kind of like, yeah, I can see that. That's been part of me. Let's get rid of that. Then the next one, Rodney. Like, there's a guy named Rodney living inside me. I don't even know what he's doing there. I just want him out. There should not be somebody named Rodney identifying himself inside of me. Once the name is given, then the Spirit is commanded in Jesus' name to reveal what it's doing there. Immediately, Rodney says, my reason for being here is to establish for Nathan the futility of reconciliation with First Nations people. Boom. And I started to think, Rodney, where do I know that name? When I was 11, only Rodney I can think of was a kid who was part of the Scoop in the 60s or 70s at Long Plain, or wherever he was at the time. His biological parents are at Long Plain now. Rodney was taken. He was raised in Michigan, went to University of Michigan, got his business degree, decided he was going to come back to his biological family and he was going to make a difference. But the cultural disconnect from suburban, affluent Michigan to his place of birth was just too big of a cultural gap for him to jump across. And so he lasted about 3 weeks and went from idealist to pessimist to back to Michigan to work in a law firm or whatever. A journey of optimism to hopelessness, Rodney symbolizing something similar in me. Rodney is the one who says to me and to you, that'll never happen here. We can try. God wants us to try, but it'll never happen here. That spirit needs to go. Because my life is about 1/3 First Nations people being here. Don't take this the wrong way. We have 4 prayers. I'd trade 3 of them in a heartbeat if we could have that one. Every day, all day long. Now, there's other people on staff that are fond of the other ones. I'm fond of them, but man, give me that one. So here we are, moving from racist to somebody whose heart now breaks every day for this. And where do you go from it? Well, I don't really know. But I know you have to love something first. You have to let it change you first. You have to do away with the language that would have you take a step back and say, what, are we just making people projects now? Yes and no. You're the project. I'm the project. And God intends to introduce some much-needed diversity, some much-needed hope into our lives so that we are no longer these monochrome, secretly bored out of our trees people who talk about the same Netflix shows, who wonder if we should get the 20-foot inch camper or the 30-foot camper, and should we get the seasonal here or the seasonal there? Gee, I wonder, this one lets me drive in. It's all fine. It's just, isn't it so mind-numbingly boring? What if some of the deepest things in your life that you think you're struggling with just are from this, like, boredom? Because everybody in my circle looks like me. And we all watch home and garden television and we talk about paint chips. Or we talk about, should I add more horsepower this way? Or should I add more horsepower that way? Again, it's fine to have hobbies, but when hobbies move into the center of what your call is, what a boring, boring life. So you don't come to church because you're bored. You don't go to house church because it's boring, and it should be. Everyone looks like you. So bring in somebody who's 90. Bring in somebody who's 19. Mix it up a little bit. You won't be bored. All right, there's the sermon intro. Now, we do have some Bible verses on the screen. Let's go to Revelation. Tim, is it Warren? Warren, the last section of Revelation. It's in the 20s. The verses are in the 20s. Yeah. All right, so let's set this up. I talked a little bit about this earlier. There's this vision of what's coming that we take all of our ethical cues from. If God's going to make the world somehow look like this someday, then I need to bend myself to that. All through Revelation 21, if we had gone through it in more depth, we would have seen things like there is going to be compassion and concern and care for people. Jesus is going to wipe away every tear, so the church needs to be a place where people receive comfort. Then we would have seen there's justice. There's certain people that are allowed in this city, the people that have been faithful, the people that have been true, the people that can ruin it for everybody, they're not allowed in. The people that you say to your kids, stay close to me because they're here, aren't allowed in. That's justice. Nobody is allowed to ruin it. We would also see that the presence of God is everywhere. What you strive for and long for and feel like you have to press into hard sometimes is just there everywhere. That would bring us to this point, summarizing the presence of God. I saw no temple in the city, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. And the city has no need of sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminates the city, and the Lamb is its light. So this is the presence of God. The Lamb is Jesus. The nations will walk in its light, and the kings of the world will enter the city in all their glory. Its gates will never be closed at the end of the day, because there's no night there, and all the nations will bring their glory and honor into the city. So it's going to be a little bit like the opening ceremonies for the Olympics. It's going to be a little bit like the Dakota Plains powwow I went to a couple weeks ago when the drum starts. And in full regalia of chiefs and kings, the people process in. And you get chills down your spine because the powwow comes in from that door. And then the people from the Congo come in that door. And then the French come in that door with a puff of cigarette smoke. I was in Paris. I can't believe how people they're still puffing like chimneys, like nonstop. They'll bring in food. How about? That's better. So you've got this messed up now image of heaven with people just puffing away with impunity. I'm going to move on. When heaven comes to earth, no one will ever have to stand on a stage like this and look out at a sea of white faces. All the nations of the world will be together, overlapping, intermingling, learning from each other. Everyone brings their unique perspective of Jesus in, and we celebrate. Don't take this the wrong way. I don't know how much longer my heart can stand preaching to a bunch of white faces. And I'm not entirely sure how God got me there. But it has me seeing the other as my sister and my brother, moving in ways I would have never thought I would, to people that at one time I looked down my nose in disdain at and grabbed their children's shoulders and cranked on them when they were misbehaving. So maybe in this, all for you, if you're like just passing through Portage on your way somewhere on vacation and you're like, what on earth was that? Well, for you, there's hope for transformation, right? Because if a white kid in Portage la Prairie who grows up racist can turn into whatever I'm describing, then you can change too. But for those of us who live here, we need to somehow allow, through our prayers, the 1/3 First Nation dream to turn into a love. Because a broken and contrite heart, Jesus doesn't turn away and go, haha, mission accomplished, I broke your heart. He says, no, I gave you this yearning, and though it hurts right now, that is the turning of the soil to put the seeds in so that something can grow. Jesus says, I am going to build my kingdom here, and that doesn't mean it's going to be 700 white people on a Sunday morning. Boy, packs are growing. No. Jesus has something very different in mind, and he has given it to us, and it aligns us with the vision of the end that he gives in Scripture of all the nations bringing their glory. My personal conviction is that vision doesn't line up if you rent your building out to the Chinese at 3 in the afternoon so that there can be a Chinese Alliance church. And then at 5 you rent it to the Dakota so that the Dakota can have their own church. That doesn't look like the picture that's being painted for us at the end. Way easier. The early church knew how difficult it was when you got a bunch of people from different backgrounds, prejudices, economic backgrounds, and they actually built something into their church service to attack it. 5 times in the New Testament, put up the Thessalonians text here, Warren. 5 times in the New Testament we read this. Greet one another with a holy kiss. Now you're getting worried how this is going to end. It's not going to end any weirder than it's been. 5 times they have this in the New Testament. This is part of what they're going to do. And so Paul here is not talking exactly about what I'm talking about. He's talking about the actual greeting. But the sacred kiss, the holy kiss, was the liturgical part of their service for about the first 300 or 400 years of Christianity. In the church service, there'd be like the kissing time. So we can say maybe that they're more comfortable with that because like that's how they said hi. And there's truth to that. There was more touching in the greeting. Except that what the church did was very subversive and very different because, yes, you would greet somebody with a kiss, but only if they were the same race, social, or economic standing as you. Otherwise, you don't come near them. The church says, let's take this thing in society that actually reinforces all the levels. Right? So in society, there's 3 people there. One is of a race that is on the outside. One is of a social setting or economic standing that's on the outside. And the other 2 people kiss, and it's like, in your face, buddy, see what we have? We're up here, you're down there. You can kiss somebody of your standing, but not up here. The church says, no. The centurions, the Greek centurions in our service, the guy who's getting paid high 6 figures a year and has 200,000 people under, that's a bit of an exaggeration, 200 people under his command, is going to kiss the part-time person at Tim Hortons who lives in the basement. The person who showered this morning and the person who showered on Thursday, they're going to kiss. That's a powerful reminder, and that forms you about the kind of human being that you are becoming and who your master is. So they would do it in the service. They would have their worship time, singing prayer, and then at the end they'd have communion, and in between you'd have to kiss each other. So imagine you get to communion, but you've had trouble with the kissing time. Somebody turned their head away. Guys, you've been there. You have the conversation, you think it's gotten better with your spouse. That asked Tamara for permission to do this, but we'll have these talks, because from time to time we might fight every now and then. And so we talk it through, and I think we've talked it through, and I think she thinks we've talked it through, so I lean in for a kiss. And I find out her neck can actually stretch to the next time zone. It's this weird, like how are you? Because I'm way taller than you, and you're like 5'6", how is your neck suddenly 5 feet long? There's something about that physical barrier that if I can actually do that, and she lets me do that, and if she not only lets me do that, but she gives it back, then we are good. Let's have communion. I have no idea what the equivalent would be for us. It's one of the questions in your house church. What is our modern equivalent of that kiss? Because if we can maybe figure out what that is, we can help ourselves move forward. I've thought about some weird ideas, like everybody whose car has a lot price of over $40,000, swap keys for a month with somebody whose car has a lot price of under $5,000, and enter into each other's lives and break through the boundaries that we put up to isolate ourselves and truly drive in another person's shoes. You can see why we need the house church help on that. I think that's about as far as I went. I'm going to invite the band back to close us off. And we're singing a song, Bring Your Kingdom Here. And I hope you understand that what we're singing between the lines is, oh God, please answer this prayer that we would be a diverse congregation that mirrors our community. Oh God, bring the kingdom inside of me now, because I'm still messed up in my approach to people. I come from a place of superiority, and the only way I know how to help is to make them a project. Help me see that I'm the project. Bring your kingdom to me. This is what you're singing. This is a prayer as we sing. So, let's do that together. Let's stand and pray.